It's not often you see a car come down this road. Hello and welcome. That's because it's not a road. It's a little track, sand track. Anyway, first comment. I have a 3-year-old child and a longing to become a Buddhist nun. Are there any monasteries that accept mothers with children? That's the first question. Not that I know of, no. So the nature of a monastery is that there are either men in a monastery or ladies in, it's still called a monastery, but you could call it a convent or a nunnery. But monastics are usually single-sexed and without their families. The purpose of renunciation, leaving the household life, is to go and live in a community with other similarly minded people in the same circumstances whom have renounced that family life to go and live, to dedicate 100% of their time to the practice. There are also Vinaya rules that are our code of conduct in order to support that practice, which do not really allow for us to be doing anything other than dedicating ourselves 100% to the practice. So family responsibilities, looking after a child, getting it ready for school, helping with homework, and supporting it financially would not come into that very practically. So it's not a practical option. It pains me to think that I would have to wait until she is 18 or older before I can begin my spiritual life. The typical family life is not for everybody, and certainly not for me. Well, you don't have to wait until your child is 18 until you begin your spiritual life. Anyone in any circumstances, if they're keeping the precepts, if they're practicing meditation, can progress happily on the path towards Nibbana. So that is, even with a family, in family life, you can attain to full enlightenment if you dedicate time to the practice. That doesn't mean you have to give up your responsibilities, family responsibilities, doing what is required of you as part of that community, that family, socially, work life, family life, but dedicate some of your time. We all have a lot of time we can use for practice that we use in other ways, just resting or entertaining ourselves or doing things that are perhaps not that necessary. So find time, make time to dedicate towards practice. Now, living in a community, as you might think, going to become a nun, you would suddenly, even if you could take your child, be availed with all of the opportunity to become enlightened. No, you go to live in a community, usually because you don't have sufficient self-discipline to make determinations and practice. So keeping precepts and making sure you meditate 2 to 3 to 4 to 6 hours every day. Even lay people with jobs, families, elderly people to look after, young babies to look after, can find at least 2 hours in every day, minimum, to dedicate to meditation, samadhi. And there is nothing stopping anybody keeping the precepts. When you go to live in a monastery, you may be given, especially as a newbie, as a probationer, as someone starting out, a novice, have many responsibilities and duties to the care and efficient running of that community, that organization, that monastery. And you may long for, as you're longing now for the spiritual life, long for the time when you could choose to just go to your room at the quiet corner of your house, or even if you just live in one room, go to the corner, find a quiet corner to face the wall and sit in samadhi when you wish to, when you want to, when you choose to. And you won't have that opportunity necessarily in community life. Now there may be, I don't know which country you're from, there may be communities that have families, but they're usually very busy, and a lot of the part of practice they consider to be part of that busyness and that running of the community. And if that's what you choose, then that's not a bad thing, and when you are able to do that, that's okay. But in the meantime, make the most of what you've got and enjoy the child you have. It's growing up. Use the love and compassion you have for that child to develop the 4 Brahma Viharas: metta, loving kindness; karuna, compassion; mudita, joy. Especially with children, there's so much joy to be had in watching them grow up, helping them succeed in their learning through their difficulties, and also equanimity, upekkha, this very important quality that is a factor, one of the 7 factors of enlightenment, that you can develop more easily because there are so many contributing factors externally in family life to rock the boat. To keep that boat steady, you have to use enormous powers of determination and self-discipline to develop equanimity, upekkha. So use it as an opportunity and don't see that you're missing out on anything elsewhere, even if you could take your child with you. And remember, you're within or are in the majority. You're not in a minority situation there. Most people are in family lives of some kind or another. Hello, I'm visiting my first, I'm getting very bitten here because it's about to rain. I'm visiting my first Thai forest monastery soon. Please can you advise how to interact with monks? I'm in the UK, thank you for the advice. And I think you go on later to say that you're where in the UK and which monastery you're going to, which happens to be Chittaviveka in Sussex. And in answer to your question, there's nothing you need to really know other than to just be polite and respectful. There's no formality. It's a very relaxed environment there. But as it is in any Buddhist monastery, go along with an open mind, an open heart, willing and ready to listen if something is being said to you. Other than that, with just appreciation of the quiet and peaceful environment. Go without expectations. It's the unknown. Go with a clean slate, and whatever you gain there will be of benefit, however smaller and insignificant to impression you may have at the time. Don't think you're going there to ask many questions and suddenly be filled with all of this information. These places are where monks live. They're where monks practice. To some extent where monks are learning or training. That is what they're doing. As a visitor, you can be a part of that and enjoy that atmosphere. It isn't a place you're going for stimulation or any sense. I know you have an understanding and you're not expecting that, but many people whom are visiting in countries like this, monasteries with stupas and temples and statues and all of the fanfare that goes along with that, are going for a spectacle. We're not perhaps doing that so much in the Western world, modern world, non-Buddhist country monastic environments, because they are simply places of training and practice. So etiquette, I mean, it's pretty flexible and there's nothing really for you to worry too much about. If you do anything wrong, you will be very kindly put right, but there's nothing you can do that would be particularly wrong. You fully understand the 5 precepts. You're not going to be walking around with headphones on, listening to music. Think of the 8 precepts and perhaps take the attitude that you are on 8 precepts when you're visiting the monastery, and then you can't go wrong. Stay within the parameters of the Noble Eightfold Path. And hopefully, if you ever get the opportunity to stay there, then they will give you all the guidance you need. And you're fortunate to have such a very good place to start. Any chant which we can say all the time. So like a mantra, I think you mean. In the tradition I'm familiar with, from background-wise, we use the simple name of the Buddha, or an abbreviated form of Buddho, 2-syllable Buddho, or Buddha, but as 2 syllables, Buddho. It can be any word, really. You can chant Itipiso Bhagawa. It's a little bit longer, a few more words if you need something to be repeating. But we don't have, in my practice, I don't have this idea that one must be going around continually chanting a mantra so many times in a day. A practice I think they call japa in some other religions, where they make a determination to say, for instance, Hare Krishna so many thousands of times every day, and continually do that. Now that's not a bad practice, in the fact that it does help settle and allow the mind to settle and calm, and leaves less room for thoughts and thinking, overthinking, papancha. However, when one gets so used to a particular mantra of that kind, you can do it automatically and then continue to think. I mean, even often in the morning chanting, I can find that I have got to a stage whereby I need to look at the book, not to remind me of the words, but to remind me as to where I've got to. Because sometimes if you are either really in a sort of a meditative state, or the opposite, you start thinking about something, you can carry on with the chanting automatically in the background and still use the thinking mind. That is when the power of that mantra is gone, really. The use of a mantra is when you're really overthinking and you want to use something to interrupt that thought. And then you could say Bhutto, 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 Bhutto. But I would always encourage, it's better to always practice mindfulness, and to enable you to do that, to use the breath as your meditation object, not only when sitting, but when you feel the need to interrupt thought, to interrupt emotions, to interrupt feelings. Oh, where's this little kitten come from? I thought it was dead. Hello. So this little kitten that disappeared for a few days, I was told was killed by the dog. Anyway, I've been interrupted. Is he okay? His little kitten? Is he yours? Anyway, I'm very happy if that's the same one to see it. I think it's a new one, replaced the other little mischievous kitten. We have an expression in the UK, I don't know whether you've heard it, curiosity killed the cat. And very sadly, one little very curious kitten, the one that kept getting stuck in my roof rafters, on its curiosity and investigations around the big dog next door, came to a rather sad ending. And now it seems to have been replaced by an even smaller kitten, which is heading your way. You may be able to hear. Hello. Interrupting a little talk there. And it's going inside. Oh, sorry about the little interruption there. Nature all around me. So using a mantra like Bhutto, Bhutto, Bhutto quite quickly, not too slowly, can often just interrupt that thought process. But using the breath is something you always have with you. And by coming back to, or just bringing your conscious awareness to your inhalation and exhalation, just breathing in, just breathing out, can also and very effectively interrupt the thought process, papancha, overthinking. And at the same time, bring you into the present moment, here and now, because of course you're only breathing in the present moment, here and now. Now, excuse me, I'm going to check out this little kitten, so I don't want it to come to a difficult ending. So pick any verse from the chanting book if you want to use it as a mantra and try it. But if it's beneficial, carry on. If not, then it's not a necessary practice. What's always necessary is mindfulness. This is the whole practice, really, is being able to maintain mindfulness from the minute you wake up until the minute you fall asleep at night. Now, I think I'm coming to that again with a comment coming up, so we'll get on with the next one. I've just been chasing around after this kitten. I didn't want it to get stuck anywhere. Can you give an example of chanting on aging, sickness and death? You said that it's a daily practice for some practitioners. Thank you. Yes, it's a reflection in the chanting book, and it's on page 66 of the chanting book link I've sent to you, the Wat Marp Jan chanting book. If you want a copy of that chanting book, just Google Wat, W-A-T, Marp, M-A-R-P, Jan, J-A-N, chanting book, and you can download a PDF copy of that chanting book, and on page 66 is that chant, where we reflect that we are of the nature to age, nature to get sick, nature to die, and so on and so forth. The 5 subjects for frequent recollection for lay people to chant. Also, we are the owners and beneficiaries of our karma. What is the purpose of all this meditation? You do 6 to 9, which is a lot. I guess you mean hours there. There must be some reason you do it so much. Because I can. Because I have nothing else that I need to do. So I take that opportunity to be able to meditate. The practice, the path, the Noble Eightfold Path is Sila, keeping precepts. And monks, us monks, we have 227 of those. There are far more rules and other codes or guidelines in the Vinaya Pitaka that we must continually be aware of. This is a way to maintain mindfulness in all of our daily activities over and above those 227 precepts. But the core of those precepts is much the same as lay practitioners, and that is to do ourselves no harm and no harm to any other beings. But then the other aspects of the practice are meditation and developing wisdom. Now, you can develop intellectual knowledge through reading of books, study, but there's only so much you can fill the brain with. The Buddha's teachings are very simple, and that is the Four Noble Truths, suffering and the end of suffering, and the path leading to the end of suffering, the practice, keeping precepts, meditation. Wisdom is the development of wholesome mind states and the reduction of unwholesome mind states. Now that too comes from meditation, this practice of developing deep states of absorption, samadhi, not from reading textbooks. So you'll find that many monks or many lay people have many occupations and duties to occupy their time, both their bodies and their brains. And there are others whom dedicate a lot of their time to meditation. I fall somewhere in between, I suppose. I mean, I know other practitioners who perhaps meditate more than that. But, and 6 to 9 isn't very many hours in a day. We're awake for something like 18 to 20 hours a day as monks. So it's not even half of your day that you're sitting, and that time goes by very quickly. 3-hour sessions are probably about the maximum length of meditation that one sits in one go before you need to get up and use the toilet or have some water, or perhaps walk up and down, practice some walking meditation, or someone comes to visit you, or a kitten turns up like just now, or something like this, a snake or a big spider or rats. You never know what's going to happen here. So there could be something to disturb that. So 3 hours is about the maximum, and that's a few times a day, would be 9. So it's actually not very long, and because I can, and mostly because it's very enjoyable. It's such a happy experience. You're seeing for yourself experiencing contentment, 100% contentment, and that is happiness. Happiness is just a symptom, the emotion that comes as a result of being content. Because there's nothing to think about, nothing to want, nothing to worry about. You're not thinking of the past, you're not thinking of the future. You're just content this present moment, here and now. And if that present moment, here and now, of pure contentment lasts for 3 hours, 6 or 9 hours, then you're not wanting to step away from that unless you need to, because of responsibilities or have to. So you stay with it, and it's very enjoyable. It is also the only way, through meditation, you will ultimately attain to or progress towards enlightenment. You cannot progress towards enlightenment without meditation, without samadhi. You need to develop absorption and practice towards attaining to the jhana states of meditation, fully absorbed states of samadhi, secluded from any mental or physical disturbances in the form of the hindrances of desire, ill will, restlessness, worry, and doubt. Okay, do you get giant bees in Sri Lanka? You were in Thailand, it says here, and you saw a giant bee. Not that I've seen giant bees. You said it was the size of a bird. Maybe it was a bird. So you get all sorts of creatures here, but I don't think I've seen giant bees. There may be, I don't know. No, anyway. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. What does this mean? So I think I replied to you by sending the chanting book again, link. But if you meant sadhu, 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 as opposed to the chanting that this comment was attached to, I don't think I answered the question, but the question, sadhu just means like excellent. So it's excellent, 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 or marvellous, 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 or wonderful, 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 or all of those words. It's an exclamation of something special and amazing and good. So if you told me, I've got the opportunity to go and stay in Chittaviveka for 3 weeks and just meditate and do nothing else, I'd say sadhu, 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 because that would be such a wonderful and marvellous and excellent thing that you have the opportunity to go and do. I might also say anumodana, which is not quite thank you. It's used in place of thank you because it's expressing mutual appreciation for the benefit you are doing. So I appreciate, say you give me some food into my bowl, I would say anumodana because I appreciate your generosity and the opportunity you have to practice that generosity, as well as the opportunity I have to receive that generosity. It's a mutual appreciation, as opposed to if someone just gives you something, you say thank you because they've given you something. It's not an exchange. There's no contractual obligation implied in the word anumodana, whereas thank you is a form of implied contractual thank you, you've done that for me, I appreciate it. It's a very polite and it's acceptable and it's fine, but monks do not usually say that because we're also expressing our joy, because you're not going to give something and say thank you, but we're expressing thank you for you for saying, you're saying thank you for being able to give, as I would be saying thank you for being able to give to you. If that makes sense. Probably not. Thank you for these. My question is whether the pursuit of enlightenment fosters desire and therefore suffering. There are two kinds of desire in Buddhism. I've spoken about this very often, I'm sure. Tanha and chanda. Tanha is wholesome desire, good desire. No. Tanha is unwholesome desire, bad desire. Chanda is wholesome desire, good desire. The difference between the two if you desire to have something something tasty to eat, tasty to drink, or you desire to watch some entertainment, you desire to satisfy the senses because you're a little bit bored, and this is just craving, this is thirst, this is wanting. That is the desire that is the cause of suffering. If you have the desire to go and practice meditation, and you're able to do so, as opposed to aversion because you want to practice but you're unable to do so, that is aversion, that's not desire. But if you are able to do so and you want to spend an hour's meditation and you have that desire to do so, this is wholesome desire, this is chanda. So it has a very different feeling to it than, say, thirst or craving does, because it is just wishing to meditate, wishing to offer dana, wishing to be generous generally, wishing to help another, be kind to someone. These are all wholesome, good forms of desire. So wanting to be enlightened, if you understand the path towards enlightenment, so you are desiring to practice that path in order to, whenever it happens, ultimately become enlightened, that will not cause suffering. However, if you just want to be enlightened, I want to be enlightened, but I'm not prepared to keep precepts, I'm not prepared to meditate and develop wisdom, then you're not willing or wanting wholesomely to practice the path, the Noble Eightfold Path. Therefore, this would be causing some suffering and would be more tanha, so thirst or craving, than chanda, which is wanting to develop one's mind, wholesome mind states, and reduce unwholesome mind states. Why do people want someone to challenge their view and then defend it? Oh, I don't know that they do. I think that was just one comment which we dealt with anyway, so sorry about that. I didn't mean to read that one out. I don't know. I mean, this is just people like and think it's good sometimes, and it expands their minds to have arguments, debates. It goes on all the time. You hear people arguing, philosophical arguments and debates. It's a practice, although it's very disciplined and very structured in the Tibetan traditions, that they have these very, they sound almost aggressive, but they appear almost aggressive, but they're not. They're done with very much consideration, thought, almost choreographed. Active debates on the Dharma. And it is a way of expanding one's understanding and mind. But then you might also get people who are very dogmatic in their beliefs and put it out there in the hopes that someone will say, no, I don't believe that, then they can argue their point back. Now this is, again, a less wholesome way of approaching a debate on a subject, and in relation to Dharma, is rather fruitless and unnecessary, because of course, as I've spoken about recently, Dharma isn't a belief system. The Dharma is a conclusion, in fact, a conclusion of facts which are just the truth. There is suffering. We can't argue about that. There's nothing to be debated about whether there's suffering or not. The cause of suffering is evident. We can see that for ourselves, and if we can't, we're shown how in the teachings of the Buddha, and therefore eradicating suffering, the end of suffering, by following the Noble Eightfold Path is indeed possible. But you're not required to believe that. Just come to understand it through your own experience. It's experiential. It's not being told. It's not dogmatic. So it doesn't come relevant here. Do you have an opinion on seeing white light upon death, and this light perhaps being a trap into life, review, and then reincarnation? No, I don't have an opinion on anything that comes from our imagination. Now there are what we call nimittas, which means signs actually, but you might during meditation see phenomena, lights, mental phenomena, in the preliminary stages of absorption, perhaps. As your brain has got used to not having any stimulation through sight, through seeing, it makes up its own stuff. This is phenomena. That's as much of an opinion I have on that. And similarly, on approaching death, I haven't so opinion upon death and this light perhaps being. So I mean, obviously someone whom has approached death hasn't died in order to be able to tell you about this, or maybe they were being interviewed at the moment of dying and explaining this. I'm not sure how this would be verified, frankly, but I would put any phenomena of such down to imagination, and this isn't to be trusted. It's just our minds coming up with stuff like dreaming. We have no control over that. When we're unconscious, we're not mindful. Mindfulness is gone. As I said earlier, the whole practice is mindfulness. Now, there are many beliefs and religions, philosophies, practices, techniques, even within Buddhism itself, that involve a lot of this kind of stuff. I don't bother with it myself. It can't be proven. It's not my experience, and therefore I don't get excited. I mean, I have nearly died before, but not my body was dying. I just got very close to drowning a couple of times in various situations and other things, but wasn't physically dying. It was just quite near a risky situation to be in. But having not experienced near death, I mean, I can't really have a view on it. So do you have an opinion on it? No, I don't. White light, yellow light, could be any coloured light, couldn't it, really? Walking towards the light and all of these stories and things you hear, I mean, there are so many. There's books and books and probably hours and hours of videos on YouTube about these subjects. So if you're interested in that stuff, fine. But it's not what the Buddha particularly, or Buddha talks about at all, or Buddhism is about. Someone very kindly have some concern about me. I was perhaps moaning a little bit about the damp and things. Really, it's very impermanent and temporary. Thanks for your consideration. They made some very good suggestions about ways I could help relieve the issue internally with the damp and things like that. But it's very temporary. As soon as the sun comes out again, it gets very hot, everything dries up very quickly. So I don't worry about such things. Can you please make videos on topics covering meditation for fast cure from anxiety disorder and your daily routine from when you wake up till you sleep? So we don't do anything fast. We're not looking to do things quickly, shortcuts in this practice. It might take many lifetimes. I've spoken at some length and detail, if you just search on this channel, English Buddhist Monk, anxiety, on many occasions about anxiety. So there are some techniques contained therein, in those talks, about how to deal with anxiety. As far as my daily routine is concerned, I don't make videos on that, because if I was making a video on my daily routine, it wouldn't be my daily routine, because I would be making a video. If someone wants to come here and video my daily routine, which I think for most people will be a very boring video to watch, because most of that, as we've just spoken about, I'm sitting doing nothing, meditating. But I wake in the morning at 3, meditate for 3 hours, chanting for half an hour at 6 a.m. At 6:30 I go on Pindapata, arms round, usually back here by 8 o'clock at the latest, when I share out the surplus and then take my own meal, eat my meal, my one meal a day, after cleaning up my bowl and perhaps sweeping around a little bit, having a tidy. I then sit down to look at your comments and read your emails, reply to those, and maybe make this talk if it falls upon one of those days. Otherwise, maybe sit to meditate then for a few hours, maybe have something to drink after that in the early afternoon, maybe meditate again or go for some walk, but not often. I don't walk often. It's too hot for walks at that time of the day here, and I've walked 3 or 4 kilometers in the morning on Pindapata, on arms round. Then in the evening, usually at around tea time, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, something like that, I might have a hot drink, cup of coffee, something like that, or some soda, something of that nature, and then sit down for meditation again. And then the evening is practically over until it starts again the following morning at 3 a.m. So that's the routine. So I can't particularly video that because it would be not possible to, well, I don't have the equipment or the inclination to do it. So if someone wants to come along and video it, then they're welcome to. There are videos on here of my entire day already on this channel, but it's just in their different parts of different videos. Me going on Pindapata, me washing my robes, me eating my meal, maybe in different locations, but it's never different. It wouldn't matter if I was in New York or here. The food might be different, but the time I sit and eat, and it's all out of my bowl, so you can't really see it, is always the same. What are the different types of greed? I feel that a new one compared to the Buddha's day is consumerism driven by marketing. So greed doesn't need to be. Greed is the root defilement. We have 3 root defilements: greed, hatred, which is kind of the opposite of greed, and delusion, which is not ignorance, but it is not understanding, confusion, in other words. And they are the root of varying degrees of greed or hatred, for instance. So just really, oh dear, I have to go and walk up the track and get some water now, is just a slight aversion. It's not really considered hatred, but it stems from the root of hatred. As does with, oh, I quite like bananas, or I really, really want to have some bananas, to just overfilling yourself on bananas, the varying degrees of greed. Now, as far as consumerism, marketing, and then one can attribute a lot of this to modern technology and smartphones, and all of this is, these are just varying degrees on greed, and are not a new thing as people think they are. Now, it's just different. Now, in the time of the Buddha, there were palaces and rich kings and people with piles of gold. There were kings offering to cover whole parks with gold to attract the Buddha there to meditate and bring his Sangha to dwell there, and all kinds of incentives of a very glossy and luxurious kind of nature. Women and men dressing in all of their finery to attract each other. It's no new thing. You can look at the beautiful peacocks, the birds, you can look at nature here, all doing that same marketing, advertising, that is just exaggerated in the modern form where we're so focused on it. Greed is greed. The root defilement of greed, when eradicated, negates all that. You walk through the airport lounges with all these smells of perfume and all of these advertisements, not lounges, whatever they're called, when you walk through that bit to get to your plane. And as a monk, you tend to just bypass straight through all of that lot these days and go and find somewhere in a corner under the stairs that's a bit of it dark and dingy, where you buy the cleaning buckets normally, where you can just sit on the floor with your sitting cloth and meditate for an hour or so before getting on the plane, because you're disenchanted with all of that stuff. Now, if you had been traveling previously in the time of the Buddha, you'd have had to walk through the marketplace where there's all this goings on, drums playing, horns blowing. Well, that still goes on in temples here, Buddhist temples here in the morning. You can probably hear quite loud, but lots of pomp and circumstances and activity. Nothing new at all. So we just consider all of this stuff as new because it's happening now. It's right to be thinking about the present moment, here and now, but don't lose sight of the fact that humanity has been the same. There have always been wars going on. There's always been suffering, essentially, and there always will be whilst there remains greed, hatred, and delusion within any of us. If greed, hatred, and delusion was eliminated, in fact, if everybody just kept one of the precepts, the first precept of no killing, the world would be an entirely different place. But that's not likely to happen, because evolution and nature is not that way. But that's just rupa, that is materialistic, that's physical, bodily, and the elements of the solidity, liquidity, gaseousness, temperature, the four main elements, and we have in Buddhism the fifth element of space for all of that to exist in, and consciousness. So it's those five elements really that are in varying forms there and are attractive or unattractive. We either like them, we dislike them. They instigate greed in us or hatred in us. It's just still rupa, form. The jhanas in meditation, the arupa jhanas, are formless. So it doesn't matter, you could be sitting in an advertiser's conference with all of the advertisers advertising everything around you and not notice it. Walking through, as I say, these airport shop places where everything's on sale and very visual, and you're forced, you can't go an alternative route to go straight, walk through these places. But you're not attracted by it particularly, when you know it's just there to stimulate the greed in us. So what are the differences between the types of greed? Well, it's all stemming from greed. Greed is greed, in varying degrees. Sometimes when I do not act on my anger, even though the external situation may not get more toxic, it feels like pressure is building up in me that can fester for some time. I may even hold on to it for days or years. If you have any suggestions on how to handle this issue, I would greatly appreciate it. Well, it sounds a bit sort of cliche, corny, even facetious. Let it go. Why do you want to hold on to it for years and fester it? You're appreciating, you already know it's only doing you harm. Forget about it. Come into the present moment here and now. This is a lack of mindfulness. You're not being mindful of what you're doing now. You're thinking of the past. It's gone. Cannot be changed. Just leave it there. That's a simple answer to that. You're using your capable thinking brain to fester, as you use the word fester, but to overthink about a situation that cannot be changed. It's gone. Forget about it. Doesn't matter now. Make a determination to not be, if you can avoid that situation, if it was any fault of your own, in the future, and then be with the present. Practice meditation. If you're keeping precepts, you're practicing meditation, you will have already developed this wisdom to know that. And these feelings are only there because you're bringing them to the surface. It's not a case of burying them, suppressing them. That is, you haven't dealt with the anger. You haven't watched the videos, the talks that I've given on anger, or understood them. Watch them again. See where anger's coming from. It's coming from not wanting. It's coming from disliking. It's coming from hatred. Not wanting the situation to be as it is at the time. But then after that situation is over, whether it's resolved positively or negatively, it is finished. There's no need to analyze it or go into that further. Just avoid that situation in the future. And that's all you need to do. So on that note, I should leave it there, and hope there's something useful. If not, then let it go. And if there is, please use it and share it. Until next time, be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu.